Well, good evening and thanks for joining us tonight here on News 20 on GTN. We've got a great show for you tonight. Joining me to my right, we have Larry Welty, the Modot area engineer. We're going to talk about the I-270 environmental assessment. Glad you could join us. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come.
Busy man today. A lot of television for yourself. Let's start off by talking about why is Modot in general studying Highway 270?
Well, Highway 270 is an old corridor. Most of the pavement and the bridges and the interchanges are 50 years old, so there's a lot of infrastructure that needs repaired or replaced. There's congestion problems along the corridor, safety problems, and then mobility and accessibility issues. So we'd like to address all of those.
When you look at 270 as a whole, basically St. Louis County and St. Louis as a whole, 270 is one of the, I would say, the busiest highways in the area.
That's correct. Just south of 70 down to 64 is the busiest portion of interstate in the state. We're not studying that part. We start at 70 and go up to the Mississippi River, but it carries a lot of traffic. At the Mississippi River, there's about 55,000 vehicles per day, and as you get down close to 270, that goes up to 165,000 vehicles per day. So that's a lot of vehicles on the highway.
As far as age of the highway itself, kind of walk us through that pattern. In terms of, is it 20 years old, 30, 40, 50 years old?
Well, it's about 50 years old. Most of it was built in the 60s and 70s. There's been some widening done to it. And then about 10 years ago or so, the 170 interchange was reconstructed. 370 was added, so there's portions of it that's a little bit newer, but the main portion of most of the bridges are about 50 years old. A lot of the pavement's 50 years old, and bridges generally are designed to last for 50 years. Pavement anywhere from 25 years or so. So a lot of it's getting to the point where we need to address the condition of it.
I think when you look at these studies, and there's been many through the years on highways all over the state of Missouri, a lot of people don't think about the need of a new highway. It's the last thing on their mind until it starts to erode, and then the study happens, and then it comes to the forefront. What's some of the response that you hear from the community when you start these studies?
On studies in general, a lot of times either it's been because the public's been coming to us and saying, we have congestion issues here, or we have other problems. They complain about potholes and all that. And so we generally are aware of the issues, but a lot of times it takes the public coming to us for us to be able to make it a priority, because we have such a large system and so many needs. We do our best to prioritize, but the public coming to us really helps. So generally, a lot of times people don't know much about it. And as we go through the study process, they learn about it, and we answer a lot of their questions. They tell us a lot of times things we don't know about it, because we don't drive, every mile of highway daily. And so there's issues that the public knows that we don't. So generally, they're supportive with it. Sometimes there's areas that people don't think they need highway improvements, and so then we have to work with the communities there.
We'll talk about it a little bit later in the show, but one thing is working with Modot, with you guys on several of these studies, is that you've just got to be patient. It takes a while to go through the study, to get the input, to get the process rolling.
Right.
Would you agree with that? And what would you tell the community?
Well, we previously did a study up here that finished up last year, and that was just a feasibility study. Let's kind of get a feel for the corridor and what type of solutions are needed, and ballpark idea of the cost of that. So that helped us to get this study, the I-270 North Environmental Assessment, funded. And so it's an 18-month study. It'll finish in fall of 2014. And then after that, we would go into design, with a successful study. Currently, we don't have money for design, but then, the design can take 2 years or more. Acquiring the right-of-way can take a year, and then construction can take several years, depending on how it's done. So the whole process, from start to finish, best case scenario is generally 10 years.
being an engineer yourself, when you are designing something like this, you're doing these studies and doing all this, and you're looking long term. I think a lot of people look long term for them as 5 years. How is this going to help me for 5 years? But are you looking at this in that 50-year bracket that you were talking about before, 25, 50 years?
Well, we do look 20 years, because we try to project traffic out that far. And you can't really do that. That's a guess. But that's really the point where, in 20 years, you might need to start be doing things anyway. So it's kind of a logical point to do that. As far as bridges and other things, I mean, we do think about them lasting longer than that. So it's very important to get things done right the first time, because it'll be a while before we really come back and make any significant changes.
When you start zeroing in on this, many sections of the Highway 270 stretch there have above average crash rates, right? Especially right at that Dunn Road area. Can you expound on that?
Well, the Dunn Road, which is the north outer road, through the northern part of the corridor, has slip ramps. You come off the highway, you cross the opposing traffic on Dunn to get to the direction you want to go. And some of those have sight distance issues. The geometrics, the way it's laid out, isn't the best for it. It's close to 270, so it can impact 270 with traffic coming off the highway very quickly. So most of them do have above average crash rates, but it's one of those situations where people come to it and they think, oh my gosh, I need to be careful. So they tend to be more careful, so that helps out. But still, it's a situation where it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to fix it so that people are comfortable driving that, and nobody has the idea that they should avoid that, because I've heard that over the years that, I avoid that area because I don't like those crossovers. And that harms the businesses and the communities along the corridor.
You touched on it at the beginning there, but let's once again talk about how busy I-270 is in terms of cars volume-wise. And do you have it broken down in the morning, the afternoon, or is it just in general throughout the day?
We do have the numbers broken down. I don't have that information offhand for that. But in the morning, westbound is the heavier direction, and so the backups can start at 367 and go all the way really to 170. Sometimes Lindbergh is a bit of an issue. In the evening, if there's the slightest incident, such as a crash or a car in the shoulder or something, traffic can back up from 367 through all the way to 170, past Lindbergh into McDonald Boulevard. So there's a lot of issues there. I know getting off on Lindbergh to go north in the evening, that backs up onto the highway many times. So there's a lot of issues with congestion. It's a very busy highway. It's even early in the morning, there's still a fair amount of traffic on it. Not congestion so much, but still a lot of cars.
And you had mentioned about 55,000 or so up until close to the I-70, and then it says here about 140 to 160,000 once it gets closer to I-70.
55,000 near the Mississippi River, and then that grows up to, I think, about 140,000 around 170, 160 at 370, and then 165 as you get close to 70. So again, there's a lot of traffic, and it builds as you go from east to west.
When you look at a study like this, besides the highway itself, there's a lot of municipalities that are involved in being part of this bridging gaps concept of the study. Explain how the cities have input and how Modot works with cities.
Well, cities are very important because the elected officials can have a lot of sway as to whether something happens or not, but the cities are in touch with their citizens, so they can represent their citizens' viewpoints, the needs, the concerns for their citizens. So it's very important to work with the cities on a study like this. And the cities that we're working with on this study, starting from the west end, Bridgeton, we have Hazelwood, Florissant, Ferguson, Calverton Park.
Kind of walking yourself down to the area there.
Yeah, Florissant, Delwood, and Blackjack, and Bell Fountain neighbors. So all of those communities will be impacted by this study, and we will work with elected representatives of those cities.
Let's touch real quick on some of the meeting date times that we had discussed where the community can have some input and they can find out more information. We'll touch on those throughout the show here. So if you feel you missed it right now, you can come back and get the information a little bit later in the show. You can see that graphic on the screen right now. If you'd like to attend, it's open to the public, and we'll put that graphic up a little bit later in the show also. Larry, let's talk about what will actually occur during this I-270 North environmental assessment. Kind of walk us through the process.
Okay. First, we will develop a statement that discusses the needs in the outlines the transportation problem to be solved. And then we'll have the data to support the problem, and it'll also discuss what's trying to be accomplished and the benefits of that. And then from that, we will develop alternatives and study the environmental, social, and economic impact of those alternatives. And we will prepare an environmental document that describes the data obtained, proposes the alternatives, the proposed alternatives and the impacts. We'll submit that to the Federal Highway Administration for review, and they will either come back and tell us that we have a finding of no significant impacts, or they'll tell us that we need to do more study, and in that case then we would move into an environmental impact statement.
So the federal part of it plays a big process in the approval or the denial of this?
Right. To get federal funds for this, the environmental assessment is a requirement. And as I said, either we get it to the point where there's a finding of no significant impacts, or it goes to the environmental impact statement. And so any environmental impacts we find in this study, we will try to avoid them. If we can't avoid them, we will try to minimize the impacts. And if we can't do that, then we will mitigate the impacts. So we will try and do something else to compensate for those impacts.
And when you mean environmental impact, for the people who don't understand, like myself, what does that mean? Does it mean?
In general, air, water, land, animals, not that that's really an issue here, but all of that stuff that you think of the natural environment. But then we also look at the social impact. How does it affect people? How does it affect businesses and such? And then the economic impact, which is also businesses. But how is it going to impact the environment, the economical viability of a community? Is it going to enhance it? Is it going to harm it? Because if we take out some of the most viable businesses, that's a negative. So, we try not to do that.
In terms of the community themselves, with anything that goes on, they feel that they want to be heard. They want to be part of the process. How important is the voice of the community in these kinds of studies?
It's essential. We really cannot go forward with something like this without having the community's input and ultimately their buy-in. Our funding all comes from the people, either directly or indirectly in some manner. And if the communities don't agree with what we propose, then it really will not happen. We're not going to try and force something on a community if they don't support it and want it. We've got a lot of other needs, other places that we'll go address those.
In terms of the study that you had talked about finishing up, we don't want to confuse the two at all. But once again, let's talk about what that study, because I know there was a lot of people that had a lot of input with that. Explain what that was and how there's a bridge between what happened in that study and the new study.
Okay. The study that we did last year, again, was just a feasibility study. It just sort of helped us to understand the order of magnitude of the issues and the solutions and such. And we had a lot of public involvement with that. We involved the communities. It was a shorter area that we studied then compared to what we're studying now. And all that information that we've got from that, and it had two major recommendations for it, two alternatives. One was to maintain and improve the existing two-way outer road system along the corridor, and improving some of the standalone interchanges, replacing pavement, improving pavement. The other one did a lot of that, but instead of two-way outer road system, it converted to a one-way outer road system, which would definitely change traffic routes and such, traffic patterns in the area. And so we take all that information from that, and we've carried that into this study, and we will do more in-depth work on this study. And again, we've expanded the limits because it made sense to really go from the Mississippi River down to I-70.
Now, we don't want to confuse anybody with, 270, 367, and all the different highways out there. But when you look at the concept of Highway 367 from start to finish, all the public input, and the way so many questions about the one-ways and getting off, and now that it's finished, and the ease of use and how wonderful it is, nothing but positive comments.
That's all we've ever heard from it is positive comments for it. So personally, I think that's probably the greatest improvement from what was there before to what's there now of any project that I'm aware of. And so with the one-way outer roads, businesses and people in the community were very much opposed to that when we first proposed them, because they really had never seen anything like that before. They were afraid they wouldn't be able to get where they were going quickly for that. But I think it's been shown that they're able to get to where they want to go. It's not confusing. Like you said, it's much more simpler than what it is. And because of some of the technical stuff with signals and all that, and the U-turn lanes we made, so you don't even have to go through the signals to go from northbound to southbound, just makes it a lot easier and quicker to get to where you want to go.
When you look at a study, though, on the scale of an I-270 compared to 367, it has to be, there's a lot more roadblocks there.
Yes.
With building the overpasses and underpasses on a major highway like 270 has to be difficult.
Right.
If even, possible.
Right. I mean, depending on what we come out with, yeah, there'll be a lot of issues in building it. Unfortunately, like I-64, we won't be able to close sections of it because we don't have anywhere to put the traffic. I-64 had a lot of parallel routes. So construction will be very interesting, but again, we will do everything we can to minimize those impacts. The solutions that we come out of this study with will be flexible so that we can use innovative delivery processes to come up with even more innovative solutions and ways to minimize the construction impacts.
Through your years of experience of what you do for a living, have you seen the way highways and these designs have changed maybe over the past 10, 15, 20 years compared to what they used to be, kind of old school compared to new school with designs across the country?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the big things that has changed in the past, a lot of the interstates had left-hand exits and entrances. That's been shown that doesn't work. That generally confuses people. The 170 interchange had those, and we rebuilt that 10 years or so ago to get rid of those. And it's reduced crashes and reduced congestion in that area. Another big change is just the way interchanges are done, types of interchanges, the length of the auxiliary lanes, both getting off and getting on, the sharpness of the ramps, and the intersections.
A lot of things people don't think about.
Right.
It comes natural to you, but for us, we don't think about those things, the sharpness of the turns and stuff. That open house is going to be on Tuesday, July 30th, and it's going to be at 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock at St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley. It's at 3400 Purcell Road. You can see on the screen right now. You can also go to the website. You see on the screen, it's www.modot.gov. And you can see the rest there, quite lengthy, but you can type it in and find out where you need to go for any more information on that. We hope to see you out there. And when you look as a whole, I'm sure you hear this every day, when can someone expect to maybe see some things happen or start to change or should I say physical changes?
Well,
Or is
as far as the major things, there's really no answer to that because we don't have the funding to continue past this study. So if best case scenario, if we got the funding, it would probably be, 5 years after this. Now, we do have a few small projects that we're doing to maintain some of the bridges in the corridor. So those will be happening in the next couple of years, but that's not really part of the results of this study. They're just things we need to do to keep our system operable and safe.
When you look at Highway 40, being able to shut that down, and then now you're dealing with a roadway that cannot be shut down, how much does that throw, I guess, a wrench into the plans of being able to shut things down and just work?
Well, yeah, when you can shut down the road and just work, you don't have to worry about handling traffic or people going through the work area and all those safety issues. That's ideal, especially if you can handle that traffic other ways. We can't do that here, so we definitely have to accommodate all the movements and the traffic through here. I mean, we might shut down certain parts of it at certain times. But again, we have to be very careful about what we're doing because people still need to get to where they need to go when they need to, and we have to do what we can to minimize the impacts to the traveling public.
A stat here says 93% of all commercial traffic in the, not just St. Louis, but in the region uses Highway 270. That's an impressive fact.
All right, it's a very important route to all of St. Louis. And this north portion of it is very important not only to St. Louis, but even to traffic across the country, because trucks going from east to west, take 70 to 270, then they'll generally take 370 back to 70. So a portion of this corridor, and if they don't take 370, they go down to 70, so that's the whole corridor we're studying, handles a lot of nationwide traffic. And of course, it handles a lot of St. Louis traffic, so it's very important to the region.
You also talked about working with the communities that are in line, Bridgeton all the way down to Bellefontaine neighbors. Do you work with sources like the airport and other businesses that might have that central, that would use that as a tool to maybe bring overseas people in, big businesses?
Right. We have a couple of committees that we've established. One's a technical committee. The airport's involved in that, and city engineers and others that's more involved in transportation is on that committee. We have another committee, which is a community committee, and that's where we get a lot of the business leaders involved and others, that would have some say into what's acceptable to them and the needs that they have and the problems that they have.
Is there a tipping balance, or how do you guys decide, okay, is there a vote? Is it 75-25, that 75% positive, 25 negative, we're going with it, or is it 51-49? I mean, how is the ultimate plan resolved and ready to be moved forward?
We try to strive for consensus where generally everybody says, well, I may not like this, but we see the need for it, so go ahead and do it. Of course, then there's other people, it's like, oh yeah, why haven't you done this years ago for that? So there's not really one point that it's yay or nay, but we really look at the needs and how well the solutions can meet those needs. And again, keeping into account the negative impacts to people and try to balance that. So even if there's a group out there that's adamantly opposed to it, we may still move forward to it. But we try and do our best to accommodate everybody and come up with the best solution that pretty much everybody can at least say, yeah, we see that you need to do this, go ahead and do it.
How does it make you feel to oversee and be part of a project like this, from the starting concepts to the finish, when people like Highway 367 go, this is the greatest thing ever? Now you're starting it, no matter when it finishes, how many years, you'll look back and go, this is a project of mine. How does it make you feel?
Well, certainly have a sense of pride in that. Since I live along this corridor, it certainly makes me feel even better that serving the community and strengthening the community. So it makes us feel very good, that we can do that. Most of us got into civil engineering or other related fields, involved in this because we had a sense of serving the community and making, it a better place to live. So when we see that we do projects that have that, it makes us feel very good.
This is a huge financial project, and what would you want people to understand and know about the project as a whole? I guess my thing would be is that you have a voice, and the voice can be at this meeting. What would be your advice to the community?
Well, definitely, we need the community to be involved. We need your viewers to go out and tell their neighbors, their coworkers, their family to get involved. They need to understand what's going on with the corridor. They need to tell us what problems they have, and what's important to them for it. So we need them to be involved in that. We need them to work with us, try to understand the issues with it, and make sure that we understand their issues so that then again we can work to the best solution that hopefully everybody can support.
As far as one of these open houses that's going to be on July 30th, does the public need to bring anything? Do they need to bring some questions, maybe some answers? Is it a question and answer format? What can they expect?
Well, it's an open house format, so we will have display boards there. We will provide the information about the corridor and what we've seen as needs, and a lot of the information really from the previous study there. So the people will be able to review all that at their leisure. We will have staff there that will answer any of their questions, and discuss different issues with them. And in the end, we want them to give us their input because that's valuable to us as we move forward into developing alternatives.
And I guess a word of advice on people who are not patient. It's probably not a good project for them to be involved in, but it's something that takes a lot of time.
Yes, it does.
From start to finish. Your advice on that time frame of just being patient.
Be patient. If we get more funding, things will happen sooner. There's opportunities where we can maybe break things out once we have the environmental assessment done, do parts of it that are the greater needs a little bit quicker. All that will be decided after this study's over with.
Well, Larry, we appreciate your time here on the show. Larry Welty, Modot area engineer. Wish you the best of luck. I know this is a big project.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Randy.
All right. Once again, you can go to everything you see on the screen right now. It's going to be Tuesday, July 30th at St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. You can go to www.modot.gov/St. Louis/I-270 North.html. It's all on the screen right now. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, and thanks again, Larry. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow night right here on News 20 on GTN.
I remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That moment?
It was a moment that changed my life. I'd been training with my team for months, and now we had been called up for the first time. The real deal. Wildfires were getting dangerously close to homes. At that moment, I got my first taste of just how important the Guard is to my community.
See how the Guard can be an important part of your life at NationalGuard.com.
Be out there. Be out there.
Be out there. Be out there.
Time was, kids did what came naturally. Spending free time running barefoot through the grass, wading knee-deep in streams, climbing to the tallest branch. But today, American kids are more likely found texting, watching TV, or gazing at a computer screen. They spend more than 7 hours in front of electronic media. Something essential has been lost. Childhood's connection to the natural world. That's why National Wildlife Federation created the Be Out There movement. Kids move indoors causes a host of problems, from obesity to ADHD. But outdoor play can go a long way to improving kids' health, body, mind, and spirit. It helps them stay fit, enhances creativity and attention spans, and could even make them better students. Do your part. Be a part of Be Out There. There's a reason why they call it the great outdoors. Learn more at beoutthere.org.